The sky was lit with bright flashes of red, faint yet unmistakable, as though someone were waving a flare light from space. We joked about UFOs, laughing as we pitched our tents. There were 5 of us friends since middle school, celebrating our high school graduation with a camping trip. The red flashes faded as we chatted and worked on our tents. Dave, the fastest among us, announced he was going to gather firewood. I remembered working the night shift with him at the local gas station last year, which had made the otherwise lonely job bearable. Eric, engrossed in his tent manual, adjusted his round glasses. Though not as close to him as the others, I recalled copying his math homework once. Ava and Sally, my cousin, teamed up to set up one tent at a time. I knew Ava's younger brother too, who often begged to join us on our outings. These memories were vivid, confirming that our group consisted of 5. As Dave went for the branches, we unfolded our chairs around the fire pit. Unease crept in as the sun set, shadows lengthening and darkness enveloping the forest. Eric fetched a flashlight from his bag, and we began to wonder why Dave was taking so long. Soon, the sound of rustling bushes announced his return. By then, we were bundled in our jackets, the temperature dropping quickly with a light breeze picking up. "Geez, you guys didn't even pull out a chair for me," Dave said, arranging the branches in the pit. 5 chairs were already set up around the fire. Confused, I tried to rationalize why all 5 chairs were occupied before Dave sat down, but my mind felt foggy, as if something was interfering with my thoughts. Unease turned into alarm when I noticed the forest had gone eerily silent. Looking at my friends, I saw the same confusion mirrored in their faces. Eric fidgeted nervously, trying to identify the extra person among us. I scanned each face, all worried and frustrated, except for one. "It's all right, I'll get the chair myself," Dave broke the silence, easing the tension slightly. I offered to help him, and we walked towards the tents, my eyes glued to the group. "How many people are here?" I whispered to Dave, who realized we had indeed packed only 5 chairs. Each of us had brought our own chair, heavy and cumbersome, with no extras. "There's 5, right? I mean, there are 5 chairs," Dave replied, his voice wavering. "No, I think maybe one of us forgot our chair," I suggested, my mind struggling to confront the issue directly. It felt like trying to think through a thick fog, my head throbbing whenever I tried to focus on identifying the 6th person. Our walk back to the tents felt surreal. The forest silence pressed in on us, amplifying every sound we made. The memory of the red flashes in the sky, our laughter, and the unease of the extra person mingled, creating a sense of disorientation. We reached the tents, but the unsettling feeling lingered. "Let's just get this over with," Dave muttered, grabbing a chair. We returned to the fire, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. As the fire crackled to life, the shadows danced around us, and we tried to dismiss the unease, focusing on the familiar comfort of our friends' faces. But the nagging question remained, who was the 6th person among us? "Yeah, that sounds about right," actually, Dave said, relaxing and heading back to the group. When we walked back to the fire pit and circle of chairs, 2 chairs were empty, one for me and one for Dave. Everything was adding up now, even though we all agreed it wasn't before. Sally suggested we were all probably tired after the long hike to get here and probably just needed some sleep. She could have been right. We were all sleep deprived from waking up very early today to make it on time. Ava brought out the drinks. The whole 6-pack was emptied. We all moved closer to the crackling fire for warmth as we took sips from our cans and reminisced on memories of last year. Ava was in the middle of telling us about that one time she was home alone with weird things happening in her house when I got these sudden chills, despite the pleasant warmth of the fire. What felt cozy and safe moments ago felt wrong now, all because I realized that there was a crucial detail I missed. "Who started the fire?" I asked, completely interrupting Ava in the middle of her story and breaking everyone else's immersion. Everyone looked momentarily annoyed until they realized they had no answer. Once again, I scanned the faces staring back at me, all barely illuminated by the light from the fire, all familiar and pale from fear. "Wasn't it you?" Eric asked. Dave shook his head. "I think the person standing behind Jenny did it," Sally said, looking over at me. I whipped my head around so quickly it hurt. My heart was pounding in my ears. There was nothing behind me, except for the encompassing darkness of the woods. Staring at those tall, dark trees behind me made me feel exposed. I felt like a lost bird in a vast field. Wait, I don't know, Sally said. Her eyes had gone wide, and she was shaking visibly. She continued to look around frantically as Ava moved over to her, placing her hands on her shoulders and trying to calm her down. I think we should leave this place, Ava stuttered. Yeah, something just doesn't feel right, but I can't put my finger on it, Dave said. But it's so dark out in the forest now. We'd probably get lost if we leave now, someone else said. Yeah, I think we should stay the night and leave as soon as we can tomorrow, Eric agreed. I tried to protest but realized Eric was right. The woods harbored an oppressive darkness within which navigation would be near impossible. Let's not sleep in our separate tents just to be safe, Sally said. We all agreed. We only brought one person tents with us, but we could squeeze two if we tried. That way, no one would be alone at night. Following this conversation, we all got up and made our pairs. I went with Dave and Sally, like always, went with AVA. Eric kept complaining that he didn't have a pair, but we reassured him he did. He wouldn't accept it. I feel like at some point, we all realized that there were only 5 of us, and suddenly we were all huddling up in the middle of the clearing. Why do we keep thinking there are 6 of us here, Eric asked. Sweat was dripping down his face despite the cold. We had nearly left him all alone on his own under the assumption that there was another person. My stomach turned as I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to mentally recap everyone here. My head throbbed, but I kept pushing it. There's me, Dave, Eric, Ava, Sally, and I was pointing at each of them as I said the name. I wretched emptied the contents of my stomach on the ground when I got past Sally. The left side of my head felt like there was a knife stuck in it. My vision was blurry. Dave held me up to stop me from collapsing, and we all wordlessly started to move towards the tents as someone put the fire out. Dave helped me into a tent while the 4 outside discussed what to do. I could only focus on snippets of the conversation as the excruciating pain beating against my skull came and went in waves. Sally had the brilliant idea of arranging 3 tents together so their openings faced together at right angles in a sort of U shape so we could sleep as close as possible and also limit the entrance to our tents. Dave was about to go help as they worked outside, but I clutched his hand and asked him to stay with me. The tents took some time to arrange. I started to feel a bit better once everyone got settled into their tents. A quick head count confirmed there were 5 of us. Eric would have to sleep in his tent alone, but he was more comfortable with it since all the tents were very close now. Looking back now, I think he was just trying to put a brave face on for us. I regret that moment deeply, letting him sleep in his tent alone. He was always less integrated into our group and knew that none of us would pair with him. Just before going to bed, we all agreed to leave as soon as the sun rose in the morning. I remember taking one last look outside the tent into the forest before trying to fall asleep. The wind had picked up and the tree branches were swaying gently. Beyond our clearing lay pure darkness. It felt like the trees were closing in on me. With the faint moonlight illuminating our clearing, I turned my head to look over at the 2 tents we had left out and saw someone standing next to them. Despite the circumstances, sleep came quickly and easily. Ava's shrill scream woke me up in the middle of the night. Dave and I ripped our tent door open to find Sally and Ava looking into Eric's tent. We pushed them aside. Eric's sleeping bag was rolled up. He was still inside it, his head in the center, face contorted in utter agony. The rest of his body was rolled around it, with the blue fabric now dripping with dark blood. Dave zipped up the door of the tent. Ava was in shock. Her eyes had become glassy and unfocused. Sally was shaking her repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. Dave picked up his torch and yelled at us to get up and run. We left the campsite behind and entered the trail we had come from. The 5 of us huddled together, Dave leading in the front as he cast his weak flashlight over the path so we could see it. All we had to help us get through this 2-hour trail was a small white circle of light. Even the moon failed to illuminate our surroundings through the dense foliage. Ava tripped and fell, twisting her ankle. We came to a stop. Someone said they knew how to splint it so we could keep going. They dragged her into the woods instead. It happened too quickly for any of us to process. Sally was about to run after Ava when Dave held her back. She struggled and managed to free herself, running into the trees to follow the echoes of Ava's screams. I was about to run after her, but Dave held me by the shoulders and shook me hard. "We need to get out of here, Jenny. Please, he said. I hesitated, but jolted into motion again when Sally's voice was cut off abruptly. She had been calling out Ava's name as she ran after her. Dave and I continued to run down the trail, trying to get to our car so we could get out of there. There was nothing we could do. At some point, there were 3 of us running on the trail, Dave and I shoulder to shoulder, while someone followed us closely behind. Dave, who's behind us, I gasped. My heart was threatening to burst through my ribcage, and my legs burned. He turned to look at me. Confusion transformed into fear on his face, and then into rage. You keep running, he told me as he produced a pocket knife from his pants. He handed me the car keys, which I nearly dropped. Then he turned around suddenly and jumped at whoever was behind us. I continued to run in fear as the sounds of a struggle grew behind me. I tripped and stumbled through the trail for what felt like hours. I didn't allow myself to stop. I almost cried when the trail ended and I walked out into the familiar car park. Not wasting a second, I ran to the car and started it up, accelerating out of that forest and onto the highway within mere seconds.